Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm Erica Wax. I'm one of the co-founders of Impact 100 London, and I'm joined by Lainey Martin, my co-founder.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us for our third annual lunchtime conversation, Refugees and Asylum Seekers in the UK. What does the future hold? We are thrilled to be hosting Women for Refugee Women today. They were the recipient of our £100,000 grant in June 2022. So we've gotten to know them quite well over the last year or so. I thought I'd say a few words about Impact 100 London. For those of you who don't know us well, Impact 100 London is a collective philanthropy. So we're comprised of individual members who each contribute £1,000 to the fund and each get a vote to award our large grant. We launched in March 2020, and we've had 200 individuals join us to give £450,000 to 12 women and girls charities in London over 3 cycles. So we're just entering our 4th cycle now, which will culminate in June 2023. One of the key tenets of our model is to maintain close ties with our grantees, providing them a platform for them to amplify their message to a broader audience while also further engaging our members.
And that's really exactly what today's conversation is all about for us. And it's a great learning experiencing, but we are really hoping to amplify the message of Women for Refugee Women. And this is an extremely timely and relevant time for this topic. For 15 years, Women for Refugee Women has been committed to stand in solidarity and resistance with the refugee women whom they support. And we all know that today's environment has become increasingly hostile. The women who benefit from these services have already endured indescribable suffering in their countries of origin and on their journeys to the UK. And now they face further trauma and inhumane treatment under the current UK asylum system. The mission of Women for Refugee Women is to facilitate the empowerment of these women. They do this through providing opportunities to connect, to learn, by supporting their aspirations to develop their personal and economic independence and their skills, and by creating opportunities for leadership. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Alphonsine and our highly experienced and committed panelists. We expect the conversation to be 45 minutes, followed by a few short remarks from our membership lead, Anila Schuckberg. And I just wanted to reiterate what Michelle said at the beginning. Please do put any questions you have in the Q&A, and we'll attempt to answer that and address those to the panel. And do use the chat box to post your thoughts, comments, or any resources that you think would be useful to the other participants.
Great. So with that, we are very pleased to introduce you to our esteemed panel today. I think they're all coming into the room now, and I'll just start at the top with Alphonsine Cabogabo, who is the director of Women for Refugee Women, but also has experience as a refugee woman and survivor of the Rwandan genocide. She is a passionate advocate and an expert in the empowerment of girls and young women. Next, we have Andrea Vukovic, who's the Deputy Director of Women for Refugee Women. She leads the organization's advocacy, influencing, and partnerships work to build a welcoming asylum process in the UK, and also sought asylum here in the early 90s from the former Yugoslavia. And then we have Shalini Patel. Shalini is a solicitor within the Public Law and Immigration Department at Duncan Lewis, and is actively engaged in many of the legal cases that are being debated in the courts and in Westminster, including the Rwandan Challenge, a challenge to the opening of a female immigration removal center in Derwenttside, the Manson House false imprisonment challenges, as well as many other high-profile cases. And last but not least, we have Agnes Tano. Agnes is a campaigner, spokesperson, and facilitator for Women for Refugee Women, and she sought asylum in the UK in 2011 after fleeing from political persecution in her home country of Côte d'Ivoire. A warm welcome to all of you.
Thank you all for being with us today. As an organization which is run entirely by member volunteers, we're incredibly grateful to Edie Lush for agreeing to moderate this discussion. Edie is a veteran journalist, moderator, and professional public speaking coach. She's a founder of Global Goals Cast, and most importantly to us, she's one of our founding members. So over to you, Edie.
Thank you so much. Well, it's delightful for me to be here, really honored. So I want to kick the discussion off, really encourage everyone to put your questions into the chat as we go along, and I'll pick them up and add them into what I'm asking. But Alphonsine, let's start off with you. We heard some of what you do, what Women for Refugee Women does from Lainey. I'd love you to expand on that a little bit more and start off by telling us how Women for Refugee Women supports women when they're navigating the asylum system.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you really for Impact 100 and for this opportunity again. And as you said, it's not only you gave us funding, but you are giving us a platform to really talk more about what we do and get more support. So that's really amazing. So you probably have heard already about it, but how do we support women who come here to navigate the system? Because that's the purpose of our organization, to make sure the women who come here are supported. So the first thing we do is to welcome them, provide a safe space. They come to us traumatized, sad, broken, and we say, let's support you first, to feel welcomed, to feel heard, to feel there are people who love you, who want to hear your stories, who want to support you to rebuild your life. So we provide that space first to come together in our office, in our hall, where they can chat, have a coffee, have a meal, support each other, share stories. That safe space is key. But once they are there, once they're settled, we provide them the opportunity to understand the UK immigration system. That is very complex. Shariri probably will explain. So when you're here and you don't even speak the language, you don't know the culture, the system is complex. So what we do, we have a partner, Notre Dame Refugee Center, and we defer to them so they have immigration case supporters. That's work with each individual woman to understand their case, help them get a solicitor, help them access any information they need. So that's key. But the third bit is really providing opportunity to learn English, as I said. Most of them we have don't speak English. Heal their trauma through classes that are uplifting, drama, yoga, radical knitting. So they have skills, but they are also healing their trauma. And we also support them to have the voice, the confidence, to be the one telling to the public and telling to the decision makers why they need to be supported to rebuild their life. So they can talk to the media, but they need confidence for that. They need a communication skills. So we provide all that, but also we really advocate for a fair and human asylum system, but we can't do it ourselves. It's the women themselves. So we gave them the skills again to be advocates, to be really, they campaign, they are activists. They are the one writing to the MPs, going to talk to parliament. So I can go on, but three key things. Really, navigate the system means you understand the system and you have someone who help you to understand it, how to write your letter, and that's key. But to navigate the system, you need also to be calm, you know, feeling a little bit, I don't know how to say it, I always remember my own experience, feeling that someone is listening to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I'd love to know how you see Women for Refugee Women as being different to any of the other organizations that you might partner with from time to time who are also supporting asylum seekers and refugees.
Yeah, that will be really easy for me. We are one of the few organizations in the immigration and refugee sector that focus on women. That's just for women. So it means we have that really intersection of gender and immigration. We are clearly, our principle are we are a feminist and anti-racist organization, but being a women organization means we understand the context. We understand that most of the women who came to us are seeking safety for maybe different reasons, not necessarily they are fleeing wars and genocide, but they are fleeing gender-based violence. They're fleeing trafficking because they are women. They're fleeing early marriage because they are women, you know, so many trauma. So that's really our unique selling point, being focused on women and by other women who understand the context and who can connect and relate to them.
You mentioned there the importance of being able to listen and being able to tell your own story. We're going to hear from Agnes a little bit later today, but I'd love to know a flavor of some of the impact that you've had. And is there one particular moment or achievement that you could point to that might tell our members about the kind of thing that happens when they get the support that you provide?
Oh God, I could say a lot, but as you say, maybe one or two. First of all, I would like to say, oh, we influenced the government to do that or that, but that's not my proudest. My proudest is recently, we had an event at the South Bank in the library for women to tell their stories through poems. And there was a young woman who, when she came, she couldn't speak a word of English. She was shy. She stood in front of an audience of more than 100 people and tell her story through a poem. And she was clearly saying, before I met women, I went to Women for Refugee Women to learn English and to connect, I couldn't do this. So saying those kind of women becoming confident, that one is still in my memory because it was only 3 weeks ago. But we have one who you met, Olivia, who became a trustee, and now she can be the one influencing the changes we want to see in the organization, speaking with experience and authority. So for me, seeing the women coming from where they were so shy and lost, being leaders, being confident, being, you know, activists. I can give you so many examples. Of course, Agnes is going to speak, and she's one of them. But for me, that's the biggest achievement. Seeing the trend. Yeah, I always tell women, I wish one day, not that I'm putting myself there, they can be like me. I started when they started. Now I'm a director because I have been supported through my journey. So supporting the women through their journey to become who they want to be, and
fascinating.
Like all of us, it's what.
I love that focus on the spoken word and allowing people to tell their stories and stand up in front of others. So thank you. Stay with us and do send your questions through. Andrea, let's come to you now. I'd love you to set some context for where we are in this debate in the UK. And when you do that, if you could clarify for everybody the difference between refugees and asylum seekers and why that's important.
Thanks, Edie. Yeah, that's a really good question to help with context setting. So yeah, a refugee is quite simply someone who has had to flee their home country because they're at risk of sort of serious human rights violations and persecution there. So a number will be fleeing armed conflicts or other crises. Some are simply fleeing because of who they are. They've been targeted because of their religion, their sexuality, you know, their political opinions. And a refugee is someone who has received international protection, which means that a state other than their own has given them safety in the form of legal status. An asylum seeker is simply someone who hasn't yet been legally recognized as a refugee, and they're still waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. And it's important to note that under international law, and notably the 1951 Refugee Convention, that anyone has the right to apply for asylum and remain there until their claim is assessed. And so that means that there's really no such thing as an illegal or bogus asylum seeker, as our politicians would often have us believe. And it's actually recognized in the convention that people fleeing persecution might have to use irregular means in order to escape and to claim asylum. Now, currently in the UK, unfortunately, that very basic right to claim asylum is under threat. Earlier this year, the government passed what's known as the Nationality and Borders Act, a series of laws which effectively undermine a lot of the protections that we've historically guaranteed to refugees. They basically propose to criminalize and punish asylum seekers who come to the UK irregularly, which means on the back of lorries or across the channel in boats. These changes are part of a trend that we've seen over the last few years that are unfortunately eroding the UK's reputation as a country that welcomes refugees. And it's fair to say that the asylum system that currently exists in the UK is really punitive and hostile. And that's in part a kind of deterrent policy. So the government believes that the kind of more hostile the system is here, the more people will be deterred from coming to the UK. And it's part about appealing to a specific support base. So sadly, demonizing people seeking safety has often been seen by politicians as a kind of silver bullet to winning votes.
Interesting. So, all right, brass tacks. If I care about immigration and if I care about supporting asylum seekers and refugees, which party should I be supporting, Andrea? Who should I be voting for in the next general election?
Well, that sort of depends on what the kind of policies are of the respective parties. So we know what the Conservatives' position is on asylum and immigration, given that they are currently in power. We've heard our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, just a couple of months ago say that it's her dream and her obsession to have pictures of refugees deported to Rwanda on the front pages of newspapers. What's less well known is where the Labour Party sits on some of these issues. And for the first time in a long time, it looks like Labour does have a real shot at winning the next general election. So it's probably not surprising that they've been a bit shy to talk about asylum and immigration. And there's clearly a kind of political calculation there that, to win some of those swing seats, especially after the Brexit vote, that parties sort of have to be socially conservative and kind of pander to that anti-migrant sentiment. And so the kind of rhetoric we've heard so far from the Labour Party has been disappointing. They focused on things like deportations, tackling the small boat crossings. And just yesterday, we saw a report that Keir Starmer had come out in support of the policy of electronically tagging asylum seekers. So it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity for Labour at this moment to kind of come out with a real vision for how we transform the asylum system. And yeah, it remains to be seen if they can deliver the solutions that we need.
So if I could wave the magic wand and let you make any change you wanted to in the asylum system, what would it be?
Well, Women for Refugee Women, I think one of the main things we really want to see in the system is women treated with dignity. So the current system really forces women into kind of undignified existence. They're often left in the asylum system for months and years at a time. They're living well below the poverty line. They're banned from working to support themselves. And we want on a basic level to see everyone have a warm and safe place to call home. Their basic living needs met. Their food on the table, a warm jacket during winter time. We also want to see more compassion in the asylum system. A lot of the women who come to the UK are very much traumatized. A number of them have experienced sexual and gender-based violence, and they are re-traumatized by the process of claiming asylum. So we just want every woman to be given a chance to really rebuild her life and fulfill her potential. And finally, we want an asylum system that is fair. It does feel like the current system is really stacked against asylum seekers. They're often treated with suspicion by the Home Office. Their accounts of why they left home are frequently disbelieved. The kind of overturn on appeal rate, which is where judges overturn the Home Office's negative decisions, stands at 50%. So that just tells you that thousands of people spend years and years fighting to have their claims recognized. And we just want everyone to have a fair shot at getting their protection claims recognized.
Thank you. So having a fair shot seems entirely reasonable. Shalini, how would you characterize the government's approach to immigration and asylum? Would you call it fair?
No, I definitely would call it far from fair. Right now, quite frankly, I'd call it a bit of a shambles. There are so many things that can be picked out from the news on immigration policies in the last 12 months, but I think there's an overarching theme that can be summarized very simply, in my view. One of the most important headlines in the last few days that many of you may have seen in the Guardian's newspaper coverage was about the failures of the Afghan citizens resettlement scheme. The Home Office has not yet accepted and evacuated anyone from Afghanistan to date, and at the cost of people's lives. The impact that will have had on individuals being able to enter the UK safely is huge. There is an increasing risk of refugees taking dangerous journeys with potential plans outlined for combating these illegal routes. But quite frankly, it's because of the failures to prioritise these safe and legal routes. The hostile environment has sadly reached a new high, sadly, for numerous reasons. There's also a complete misconception being put out by the government's current rhetoric on so many big issues, one of them being the fact that asylum seekers should be seeking refuge in the first country that they arrive in, the offshoring processing to Rwanda, the lack of, like I've said, the lack of safe and legal routes to the UK, the criminalisation of those who are crossing the channel to try and reach safety, and most recently, the opening of a new immigration removal centre, Manston House, which apparently at one point had over 3,000 people held there when it was originally only meant to hold 1,000 people. In my view, it can be called no less than a concentration camp, the way people were being held there. My main concern with the government's current approach to the asylum and immigration system is being one of complete disbelief of all individual stories at first instance, and the impact that this, we're here to talk today to talk about the impact on women. And it is the impact on women that's really concerning. Women who have been victims of trafficking, sexual exploitation, gender-based violence, who are naturally very submissive individuals as a result of the trauma they've suffered. And the current rhetoric of complete disbelief of all these individuals is not going to do anyone any favors.
So you're involved in a number of cases. Erica mentioned them at the top. I'd love you to lay out those different cases that are challenging the government's approach to asylum and which ones you might think have a better chance or a good chance of succeeding.
Sure. So I've recently been involved in the challenge against the Rwanda offshoring program. Duncan Lewis represented 3 NGOs, Care for Calais, Detention Action, and the Public and Commercial Services Union. And we had 8 individual claimants who were actually on that plane ready to leave when we received the injunction from the European Court of Human Rights. The final hearing took place over 3 days at the High Court in September. We're waiting for judgment on that. The court highlighted during the progress of that case that there were serious triable issues. We're hopeful that, although I'm not sure how likely it is that we'll get a complete write-off of the whole Rwanda offshoring scheme, I think the current agreement and the memorandum of understanding that the UK has with Rwanda is going to have to be reconsidered. If we don't win, we'll definitely be going to the Court of Appeal, so watch this space. But the court also took notes of evidence from the UNHCR that those transferred to Rwanda would not have access to a fair and efficient procedure for determining refugee status. So yeah, it's hard to say. We'll just have to see what happens when we receive judgment. Another one of the cases that I'm now dealing with, as I've just mentioned, is the Manston House. We represented the NGO Detention Action and 1 individual claimant in pre-action proceedings. So we hadn't actually issued the challenge. We just wrote a very long letter to the Home Office saying you're acting well out of your statutory limits here. And luckily, before we had to issue proceedings, the Home Office emptied the whole of Manston House, knowing that they were acting unlawfully. Individuals were being held there well in excess of statutory time limits, in breach of common law limitations, contrary to the Secretary of State's own published detention policies, and in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. We are now representing at least 80 individuals in claims of compensation for the time that they were held there unlawfully, and I think that number will increase. Another challenge was the challenge that I was instructed on by Women for Refugee Women in a test case against the opening of an immigration removal centre in County Durham, where there was a real risk that detained women were effectively prevented from having access to justice, as there was no access to legal aid lawyers in the vicinity of that detention centre. We argued that remote-only advice was far from adequate for these very vulnerable women who were there, who were being held there. Most likely, majority of the women we will work with are victims of torture, trafficking, genocide, sexual exploitation, and they need that face-to-face interaction with their lawyers to build that rapport. Unfortunately, we lost at the High Court. We're now waiting for a decision at the Court of Appeal. I think the Court of Appeal are taking a slightly different stance to the lower courts and are more willing to make decisions that go against the government. But again, I don't know. Let's see. We all have our fingers crossed. And if I have time, do I have
Sure.
time? Yeah. The Channel crossing deaths last year, there were a death of, I think it was 32 people, or 27 people actually, whilst they were making the arduous journey over to the UK. Duncan Lewis is setting up a compensation scheme for the families of the deceased and calling for a public inquiry into the deaths on the basis that we've had disclosure of telephone calls between the British and French authorities of nobody taking responsibility and those poor people being out there on the Channel for over 12 hours. We want to progress the case, but legal aid has been refused on the basis that the claims are premature. However, on Saturday, The Guardian revealed that the Coast Guard, who any inquiry would be up against, has been assigned a £19,000 contract to an independent company to witness train in the event of an inquiry, suggesting that they're gearing up for legal action. And here we are, we can't even get a witness statement from our clients because we're not funded.
Wow, that is pretty incredible. Thank you, Shalini. Any questions for Shalini, put them into the Q&A. Let's come to Agnes. And before I do, Agnes, I'm just reminded of the stories that I've told on my podcast, the Global Goals Cast. One of the things that I always talk about is the fact that immigration is ancient, unstoppable, and positive if it's well managed. And I think what we've heard so much of already today is how poorly managed it is. And yes, I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. Tell us, we know you're from Côte d'Ivoire. Tell us about the circumstances why you came to the UK.
Thank you. Do you see me properly?
Yes, you look great.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Agnes Dano. I'm 66-year-old now. I came here 11 years ago. But before coming here, I was the personal assistant of the First Lady of my country, Côte d'Ivoire, Madame Gbagbo. I came here because a civil war broke out in my country and I have to preserve, I have to survive, and I fled to UK because I have a daughter and a son who were studying here, and I got a valid visa. Where I can go was here. So from Ivory Coast, I fled to Ghana, and from Ghana, I reached here in 2011. So here is Agnes.
Interesting. So tell us what happened after that. Once you started going through the immigration or the asylum system, and in relation to that, I know you care very deeply about Women for Refugee Women's Set Her Free campaign to end immigration detention. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your story in conjunction with that campaign and how it resonates with you.
Thank you. The first thing that I would say that I want to say thank you to Women for Refugee Women, because despite my English everything in 2014, they allowed me to join the campaign of Set Her Free. I did the video and think I'm with them and what I can do. I'm really involved in this because what happened to me, I don't want it to happen to other people. I came here asking for sanctuary, and I found rejection, prison, and and hard time for at least 8 years. And during this time, I was detaining when I went to report as usual. I stayed more than 3 months in the detention center. And I'm always feel, I don't know how to heal from that. I always feel emotional when I talk about what happened to me. And I don't want it to happen to my sister. It's why I will stand and talk as long as I can talk everywhere that I can speak. I would to say that people are coming here to claim sanctuary, safety, protection, and they find themselves in prison. And you don't know, I hope that they can put their feet in our shoes and go for a detention for just 1 week to see what is going in there. Is why I'm stand with Women for Refugee Women. And from this campaign of Set Her Free, I will say that a lot is achieved, even if it is not our goal for now. Our goal is to end detention. But from this campaign, the number of women detained drop down. When they start this campaign, was around 300 women in detention. Now around 70. Also, the time of women, pregnant lady, are reduced. Before they can stay there, even there were family in the detention. But from there is a reduction of the time of women in detention. I think is 3 days, if I'm not wrong. So there is some achievement, but our focus and my belief is we should end immigration detention. Is what I want.
Thank you. I'd love to know about what you might be planning next. What's next for you in this campaign and within Women for Refugee Women?
Yeah, for us, until we'll have people in detention, we will stand against that. So if the fight have to take 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, we will stand until no more detention. The first thing is that Home Office broke her promises. When after the Set Her Free campaign, they said that we are not going to build any more detention center for women. They break it. They start the one in country their went side. We joined the group there to campaign for more than a year. We didn't. They opened this prison, but we will still go for the protest until they end this. So it's one of our main goals for now. Shut down the detention of the one side. So we are for that.
Really, you sound so passionate and you're an incredible spokesperson. So thank you, Agnes. I'd love to hear Shalini, Andrea, how likely is that? How likely can we see detention centers for women or women being put into these shut down?
Yeah,
Andrea, do you want
I
to?
can.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll come in briefly and then hand over to you, Shalini. I mean, as Agnes said, the campaigning over the last few years has been really successful in sort of decreasing the number of women who are in detention at the moment. But unfortunately, we've seen the government kind of reverse track and say, actually, if we want to execute our plans as kind of foreseen in the Nationality and Borders Act in terms of detaining people and sending them back to other countries, we do need to expand the detention estate. And unfortunately, there are plans for 2 new immigration removal centers to be opened just next year. And then the general kind of rhetoric that we see coming from government in terms of detention is really particularly concerning. So I think overall the kind of picture for sort of more positive change on our issues isn't amazing. That said, I would say that there are, I think, a couple of reasons to be hopeful. I think it's important to look at where kind of public attitudes are on a number of our issues. And there has been recent research into where kind of the public is on some of our issues that's actually shown that there's a trend of a kind of warming of attitudes towards immigration and asylum, and that actually there's a growing number of people in the UK who actually think we do need to have a kind of fair and compassionate asylum system, which is really promising and something that we can tap into. And then we've also seen increasing kind of division even within government. So it was really notable to see, for example, the immigration minister, Robert Jenrick, actually distance himself from some of the comments made by Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, about, the small boats being in a kind of invasion on our shores. And so I think there are some political divisions, even amongst the Conservatives, which show that they're uncomfortable with the really hard-lined approach that's being taken. And again, I think, I really think we need to exploit that through our campaigning and really build support and kind of pull the center of the debate towards us on refugee protection. And in doing so, I do think it's a long game. I don't think there are necessarily any short-term tangible wins over the next year or so, but I think we can really lay the groundwork for some, a really massive overhaul of the asylum system, which is long overdue. But Shalini, you might have more to add on the legal challenges against detention.
Yeah, and I'll just add before I hand to Shalini, a couple of questions coming in. Is the UK unique in its practice of immigration detention? What other countries act like the United Kingdom? Or are there any places, I would add, where it's done well, where we don't see this done, that the UK we could try to move the UK towards?
Happy to try and answer that. Just to add on the immigration detention point, I think the best way to try and minimise detention is by way of legal challenges. I agree with Andrea that we've got a long way to a long fight ahead of us to completely stop immigration detention because of the way that the government deems it as being so vital. The government has recently introduced GPS electronic monitoring tagging, which again is such a big issue that their thinking behind it seems to be we can let people out of detention but just tag them, which is obviously a huge violation of their human rights, data protection issues. But at the moment, I think it's going to be just legal challenges for individuals who are detained there unlawfully for too long. Going to the question in whether the UK is unique in its practice of immigration detention, from what I have seen and when we were part of the Dublin Convention pre-Brexit, some of the European countries' detention systems are quite similar to ours. In fact, some of the countries already have detention centres, such as Manston House, which we've just experienced. So I can't comment any further on that at the moment. Andrea might be able to add to that, I'm not sure.
I think the one thing I would add is that my understanding is that the UK is one of the only countries that doesn't have a time limit on detention as well. So most other countries in Europe and across the world, if someone is detained for immigration purposes, there's a real limit to how long that detention can take place. In the UK, there's no limit. And that means that a number of women that we've supported and worked with in the past have been in detention with no idea of what's happening with their cases or when they'll be released for months and even years on end, which is truly shocking and alarming.
And the one thing I would add to that I find really shocking is that even criminals know when their release date is. It makes no sense.
There's a question about restrictions on refugees' ability to work. What are those? And if they were lifted, how would it help refugees settle in the UK? Love to hear from anyone who'd like to, but also from Agnes about maybe her experience as well and how long it took her to be able to work.
Thank you, Eddie. I think it's not right that people don't work. I will only take example from Africa. In Africa, we don't live on benefits. And one of the reasons that the government use here, asylum seekers are coming to take the benefits. They are not coming here to take benefits. We have 2 arms and we can work. The other thing that we can work for the charity not being paid. I work for charity for 6 years. For project Baobab, I was not receiving, but it was work, giving my time. And even when I was in detention, I was working, serving food, cooking food for 57 pounds. So why they don't leave people work and take care of themselves? I'm strong. They are strong. Let them work and bring more income. It will help everyone. It will help everyone. So for me, it doesn't make sense that they don't allow people to work when people are healthy, when they are not used to benefits. We are not here for benefits.
Given the employment needs in the United Kingdom, I would absolutely agree with you, Agnes. Anyone else want to add that on the legal restrictions on working? Alphonsine, do you want to come in there?
No, I think probably in terms of legality, Shalini or Andrea will know better than me. But for me, I can only say what Agnes is saying. If you are allowed to work, you have a chance to build your life and to contribute, and you are less seen as someone who's coming to take, benefit. So I will but let Andrea or Shalini say, legally, why that's not acceptable? Because I still don't get it myself.
Yeah, the current policy is that people seeking asylum can only apply for the right to work after they've been waiting for a decision for 12 months and only for jobs on the shortage occupation list, which includes some really niche jobs like professional ballet dancer. And as you can imagine, most asylum seekers don't have those kind of qualifications. So it's effectively a ban. One of the reasons, the main reason why the government says that they don't want to allow people to work, and just to say that this is out of step with the rest of Europe, is that they don't want to attract more people by introducing more kind of generous welfare policies, despite the fact that there's absolutely no evidence that, people seeking asylum coming to the UK have any idea of what they'd be entitled to once they arrive. And it is very unfortunate because a lot of the women that we work with are skilled, and some of them working in, doctors, nurses, jobs that would be certainly very welcome here in the UK, and are banned from doing so for years at a time, during which time they're de-skilled. And of course, once they do gain refugee status, it becomes even harder for them to enter the labor market.
Just to add to that, we have recently challenged the shortage occupation list and the right to only apply for a right to work after you've been waiting for a decision on your asylum claim for over 12 months. We were successful in, I think, 2 or 3 of the challenges we ran. If you make representations to the Home Office now saying you have to have a set of skills that are outside of the shortage occupation list, ideally with some sort of medical evidence as to how it would benefit the individual, the Home Office may sometimes overlook those rules.
Interesting. So there's a question around the media stories that are saying that Brexit has contributed to the higher numbers of refugees or people seeking asylum. Is that true?
Is there anybody else that would like to answer this before I step in?
Go for it.
No, the short answer is the UK actually has taken less asylum seekers in the last year than other European countries have. And this goes to the whole question of why don't people stay in the first safe country that they arrive in? Majority of people do stay in, the likes of Germany, France, and not everyone comes to the UK.
Or indeed Kenya or Uganda or Lebanon.
Absolutely, exactly. Yes, I'm just speaking from the statistics that I have seen in relation to the European countries, but absolutely, exactly. However, I must add that some of these countries may have economic problems, such as unemployment or food shortages, which make it impossible for people to survive at the first safe country they arrive in. And that's why some therefore decide to move on to other countries. But the biggest pull factor for people arriving to the UK is not because there's this perception that the UK is the best country to come to. More often than not, it's because people have family ties in the UK. And when you're fleeing absolutely everything you own and there is nothing left in your life apart from your family members, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
So a lot of questions. Agnes, did you want to come in on that at all? Because I know you
Yes,
came here because you
yes,
have family
yes,
here.
yeah. I will add on this. I came here when I left my country. I have a visa to go to USA for 10 years because I had a diplomatic passport going around everywhere with with the first lady. So I have a visa for 10 years to go to US. But I don't have anyone there. I have my daughter and my son here. So most of people who come here is because they have a link here or a community who can, comment on dit ça, les recevoir.
Support,
Accommodate,
accommodate.
accommodate there. So when people come, what I will say, let them go to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions coming through. So the government has a policy which says who shouldn't be placed in detention, but this is often broken. How are they able to get away with breaking their own policies and laws? And maybe a related question, how will it be possible to encourage the Labour Party to make a more progressive and fair stance on the asylum system? Throw that to Andrea or Alphonsine.
I can just start by saying, and Andrea will come in, this is one of our focus is to target some of the key people in the Labour government, to talk to them about the stories of the women in our network, to make sure we can connect with them and they can hear from the women. So when they hear it from them, and hopefully they can get it, but also to make sure that in our campaign, we are empowering the women to talk to the MPs in their own communities. So really to reach to them with the stories that can just open their mind to the reality.
Give us an example of one of those stories that's influenced an MP.
I think I could give Agnes as an example that can influence MP, but we have quite few women who can talk to them about the fact they came here because they have been raped, they have been, gender-based violence, and no one have listened to them. They have been detained. We have quite few stories of like that, like Agnes and others. When they talk to the MPs, they can say, do you realize, put yourself into my shoes. If you were coming here and you had been subject to all kind of violence you can imagine, and no one is listening, no one is allowing you to change your situation. But for me, when I speak, I sometimes give example of positive things. I say, I came here, survived the genocide through this and that. Now I have a job, I contribute. I give back to this community that's welcoming. So what women tell, the stories they tell sometimes is to positive stories of how a good support, a good asylum system that allow you to rebuild your life is rather positive than negative. But Andrea can say in terms of her campaign team, what they are trying to do.
Yeah, as you've said, obviously Labour is a kind of significant target for us in our campaigning at the moment. I mean, I think it's important to remember that Labour's sort of traditional support base are people who are sort of more socially kind of liberal and people who are welcoming of immigration and asylum. And I think one of our tasks over the next couple of years in the run up to the general election is to really mobilize that support base so that they are, vocal and really speaking out against some of the really harmful changes that are taking place. And really, as I said at the beginning, trying to shift that center of debate, because at the moment we have Labour following the Conservatives down this path of sort of more hard-lined policies, which is, ultimately going to be incredibly harmful for our system. So it's about kind of drawing those barriers in the other direction and actually, saying we can be more idealist, we can be more outspoken, and really trying to prove that, again, being kind of hard on immigration, on asylum, isn't the silver bullet for winning votes. It's not necessarily what's going to win over those swing seats. At the moment, people have numerous other concerns on their mind. Interestingly, for the first time in a long time in the run up to the general election, asylum and immigration aren't really those kind of top issues. We have things around kind of cost of living and kind of impact on public services, and inevitably the debate will kind of turn towards immigration and the impact that has on some of those issues. But I think it's up to us to really stand firm and actually say we can be more confident and we can be more visionary about what we want to see with an asylum system, and in doing so, hopefully give Labour that space, that kind of popular cover to join us.
We're running out of time. I do want to try to ask this question around what happens to women who are deemed refugees and allowed to stay. Are they sent to different places in the country? What if they have no personal connections there? There's also a question that's come through about, has the volume of asylum seekers actually decreased in line with the increasingly draconian detention measures? So Shalini, do you want to have a go at those?
Yes, so the number of individuals coming to the UK has not decreased, unfortunately, for many reasons, as we're all well aware of situations in other countries. I think people are hopeful and maybe not as aware until they arrive here how bad the situation is in detention centres in the UK. Unless you speak to a family member who's been detained, you wouldn't think the worst. You'd have no reason to. And when people are fleeing for their lives, I don't think somewhere like, I'm going to be detained for a few days even crosses their mind. So unfortunately, no, I don't think that has an impact. So the government clearly isn't achieving the objectives they seem to be hoping to by putting people in these horrid situations in detention centres. And the other question was in relation to where refugee women end up going to within the UK. So once an individual has been granted refugee status, they have a right to work, they have a right to study, they have a right to find housing where they would like to find housing. So there isn't necessarily a restriction where in the UK they would end up. But sometimes a lot of it does depend on where their support networks are, if they're in touch with the likes of Women for Refugee Women, or if they've lived in London the whole time through the process of their asylum claim, then they may choose to stay in London or Birmingham. So yeah, there isn't, in short, any restrictions on where they choose to go.
Thank you. We haven't gotten to a couple of questions, and as Michelle said at the start, we'll endeavor to get those answers to you. I think we were able to answer that question around how Women for Refugee Women lobbies and speaks to the UK government on an individual MP level. Before I pass back to Aniela, I'd love to hear, Alphonsine, what can the people who are listening here today do to support your efforts?
I will be very brief. Just to continue these events, to continue to hear us, hear the stories, hear what we do, and be our voice, use our network to continue to support us. But also, as Agnes said, and Karenza have shared it in the chat, sign the petition to really shout down the site. No detention center should be around. So please sign that petition. But above all, follow us on social media, follow us so you can know our campaign, you can know what we want to do, you can continue to be part of it. Because if there's one thing I'm going to say, thank you. Since connecting with you, it hasn't been about man, it's been about other women listening to our stories and being our voice out there. So together we can work for a fair asylum system. Together, what we want to be the solidarity, and you are that voice of solidarity. So continue to follow us and be with us on this journey to end the tension, to end the situation, to really dream of an asylum system that treats every single woman who comes here with dignity.
Thank you very much, all of you, for those really powerful interventions. I will leave the conversation here. I love your emphasis on positive stories, and I can tell you 100% that is what we do on Global Goals Cast, and we do it because our partners in the UN learned the hard way that telling people the sad stories doesn't work, but telling people what happens as a result of being supported and as a result of being able to have positive change happen in your life does inspire change, and it does inspire people to get involved. So, Aniela, back to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edie, and thank you to all the panel, to Alphonsine, Andrea, Agnes, and Shalini. That was just an extraordinary conversation. I think it's just unbelievable what you guys have been through, and yet what you're willing to do for other people to make sure that they don't suffer as you have. You're an amazing group of women. Thank you so much. Also, thank you, Edie, yet again for helping us with your amazing poise and skill. I don't know how you do it. You're amazing. So thank you so much. Before I let you go, everybody on the panel, we just want to take a quick picture for posterity and for social media. Alphonsine, we'll get it up there. So I don't know who's doing it, but it's going to happen at some point. So smile. Great. Thank you very much. So I think the panelists are going to go back to the audience, as it were, now. But we just wanted to thank all of you, our participants and members, for joining us today. Obviously, it's an extraordinary conversation, and we will be watching and learning more about how we can help refugee women ourselves. And I think I have no doubt that with a group of women as committed and as indomitable as the women at Women for Refugee Women and Shalini are, that the asylum system will one day, hopefully in the near future, be much fairer than it is currently. Obviously, we will continue, as Impact 100 London will continue to support Women for Refugee Women, both financially and in lots of different ways as well, and I hope that you will all join us to do that. But we are also now looking at the charities that we hope to support in 2023. We already have over 130 members committed to being part of that effort this year already. So if anybody's on the call and isn't a member, would like to learn more, please do get in touch. Don't hesitate to contact us. I think there's some links being posted now about how best to be in touch with us. But thank you so much for joining us today. We're only 1 minute behind schedule. So thank you for joining us. Have a really great afternoon, and thank you again to all our extraordinary panelists. Thank you. Bye-bye.